Welcome to the Leadership Table, where conversations inspire, lead, and elevate. I'm your host, Jason E. Brooks, bringing you insights from top leaders who are shaping industries through leadership, culture, and success. Today, we're honored to have Danny Klein, the editorial director at QSR and FSR magazines, join us, and he's joining us in order to discuss how communication shapes restaurant brands and the stories that we tell. Now, Danny has been with food news media since 2015, starting as an associate editor for FSR magazine before moving into leadership roles. In 2021, he was appointed editorial director, overseeing content for QSR and FSR, two of the restaurant industry's most respected trade publications. A graduate of the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications, Danny spent over a decade covering high school, college, and professional sports before transitioning to the restaurant industry. His expertise in storytelling and branding has made him a respected voice in hospitality. Before we dive in, be sure to subscribe and share this episode with a fellow leader who could benefit from today's conversation. Now, Danny, welcome to the Leadership Table. I know I just gave you a brief intro, but still.
I need to bring you with me, Jason. You gotta come with me places to intro me.
We walked into Burger King. I'm like, Danny Klein, editorial director, the University of Florida College.
Yeah, no, I'll take it. No, thank you. It's good to be here.
Excellent. Well, one of the main reasons why I wanted to reach out to you to come on to this show is that, of course, we are focused on conversations that inspire, lead, and elevate. And we are speaking through the leadership, culture, and success that brings leaders to the table. Some of those conversations that are at that table. The question, though, is how do you decide which stories resonate most with restaurant leaders and operators? Because you and your team are a huge voice to where the industry leans its ear towards when it comes down to leadership, hospitality, and those conversations.
Yeah, there's so many ways to answer that question. Kind of a quick overview. I think a long time ago, and even when I started in media, I would say that there was a lot of this element of, we're here to tell you what's important, and you're reading it. Still a thing, right? But there's so much more of that now, is that because the networks are open and going both ways, you have this now part of it, the conversation, where you're reacting to the way people respond to the things that you write versus constantly, it's sort of like if you had a textbook, right, and you gave it to everyone and it said in there, you should be focused on the world being round. And interestingly enough, like if you go hop on X or whatever these days, and if you really believe the world is not round, you go find a whole bunch of people who believe the world is flat. And while we don't want to necessarily promote such things that are inaccurate, you do have to take into account as a media organization that it is more collaborative on the content side than it used to be. And that is a really good thing if you want to embrace it, which for me, many years ago, my former boss, Webb Howell, who was the owner and founder of QSR in 1997, had me read this book called The Content Trap. It was written by this Harvard professor, and it was very boring, but I knew I should read it since he asked me to, and he was my boss, and I was, pretty new to the company, and what did he want me to learn from this was kind of what I was asking myself as I was trying to stay awake reading it every night for a while. And the whole book, honestly, was kind of about, looking at content through the lens of user connections. So what does that mean? And so it's this idea that you can take a bunch of different forms of content and it can be seen through a few different ways. And one of them being like, I'm going to pick up QSR magazine because, hey, I want to be educated. I want to see what the trends are. I want to be entertained and read about the industry that I'm in. But I also want to read this because I would like to be the guy who I'm reading about, or I wouldn't mind being in the room with, this person who's being featured in this story. I aspire to be within this space. So for us, it became this idea of, and this is years ago, I had looked at this chapter on The Economist, and The Economist had gone through this transformation of realizing, like, we can't really compete with the way the internet has opened the floodgates to content, from a page view perspective or from an engagement perspective. But what we can do is we can create a magazine that is very specific for a very specific person, and they're going to pick it up again to better themselves, but also to say, like, I wonder what Jason thinks. I wouldn't mind meeting Jason someday, or like, I'd love to be in the room with this guy. And so I wrote this mission statement, this whole thing of like, I want QSR to be the Economist of the restaurant publication world, but less pretentious. But the idea being like, let's create the restaurant magazine for the restaurant enthusiast, or restaurant nerd as we called it at the time. And then we went back and changed the wording because, nerd is got some weird connotations. But that really created this idea for me to start looking at, like, how do we pick what we want to write about? So here's a good example. 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, some amount of years ago, I got this message on Twitter from this guy, relatively well-known guy, making fun of us for writing this really long story on Taco Bell's Defy location in Minnesota, the drop-down 2-story drive-through that they had created. And he put in there something like, oh man, like, what's going on in the world when you've got breathless coverage of a Taco Bell? And so I responded to him. I was like, if someone's going to provide breathless coverage of a Taco Bell, it is QSR. And I screen grabbed this, and he wrote back something stupid to me, but I screen grabbed this interaction and I sent it to everyone on our team, on our sales team, and I said, this is who we are. Like, we are the person who's going to provide breathless coverage of Taco Bell. And what that starts to do, and as someone who's familiar with us, thankfully you're also a contributor of ours, you can start to see this in action, because what we have created in a lot of the ways that we write stories and the way that we plan in person of events and the way that we do webinars and we do these virtual power hours for our Women in Leadership series and the way that we do social media, it is all designed with this idea of creating this gravity point for you to not only come to us, but then for us to connect you upward through the industry. And this is a very complicated way of saying that we write about the news, so we tell you what's happening. We also give you how-to information from industry experts, and then we give you features that go behind the scenes, and we do all the things that everybody else does. But then the added element to our content, in my opinion, and it makes us who we are, is that we have created this user-connected universe for you to be a part of. And that is the guiding post of how I view B2B content and the way that I think we view conferences in particular these days, which are, making me old. But if you do look at like how they're different compared to some other conferences, you'll understand like kind of where my brain is at. So that's a long answer, but to be fair to me, you just asked me basically why I exist. So it is not a uncomplex thing. But like here, all right, last example I'll give you, like we just launched a few weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago. I'm sure you might have seen this. We did this CEO to CEO series, right? I don't know if you saw that. So I had been thinking to myself, I'm like, I want to do some sort of video. I see other versions of this from competitors. Nothing wrong with it. Not knocking any of these things. But like, what could I do that's QSR-ish, right? Like a version that feels like us, that I'm comfortable with, that I think serves like our broader mission statement that I'm telling you about. And it was to get out of the room. I just got out of the room, right? So I brought them into the Zoom call to CEOs, and I shut my camera off, and the conversation is just the two of them talking for an hour. And it's very rich content, so it's that deep, breathless thing that I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. And it's also user-connected content. I didn't really do anything but give them that ability. And what you end up coming from that is not only really useful insights, but they appreciate that access to one another. And then I have other CEOs who reach out and they want to do that with a CEO that they know. And so now you're creating this kind of upward continual version of this QSR space where people know to come here to see that other person, right? Again, it's a long answer, but that is the answer. And it's ever evolving every
You
day.
have just really hit it on the head. Hopefully readers go back and hit rewind. Not readers, watchers, viewers. If you're listening, hit rewind. There are so many golden nuggets in what Danny just said. A few of those are wanting to make sure it's not a one-way direction of this is what we're writing, this is what we deem is important, so this is what you are going to read or listen to. It has converted from that in the past for every magazine, every newspaper, to how do we make this a user-friendly two-way road highway of the interaction going back and forth, and not just back and forth with the reader or the listener and QSR or FSR, but even stepping all the way into CEO to CEO, creating that room, that space for them to actually go over what's most important that's on their minds. And that is key, because whenever we think about what resonates most with restaurant leaders and operators, they should have the space to actually dictate that. They should have the space, the room, the opportunity to bring what they want to the table and to have those discussions, and then we can add value to it. So I actually love that.
Yeah, and so you'll see this in a lot of stuff. So, like yourself, we have a lot of contributed writers, and so we're giving a voice to people from coaches to operators to vendors. And, vendors are always an interesting outlet to me, really one that you should tap more often, because if you think about like who's trying to figure out the solution, it might be a person who hears all the problems. So yeah, and we look at podcasts that way too. And, I interview a lot of people on there, and sometimes I get asked this question, like, what are the metrics? I'm like, I don't really know. but I do know that, like, I'm building the network. I'm continuing this conversation. And then when, like our event, as you might have seen the other day when I posted, like, I had to really think about this, from a perspective, again, of like other events I've been to and what I want to do. And I just opened the door to moderators this year. I have So year one, and a lot of this was just because it was bootstrapped and we were trying to figure out what was going on. But like our team internally, I was just doing what I see elsewhere. We moderated every single panel. It was crazy. It was 5 tracks at once, 2 days. And I must have done 20 of them. I don't remember. This year, we are not moderating. I'm not moderating, well, at least like from the panels themselves. I have a moderator for every single topic this year. And that is the type of thing I think, like, I find that to be very valuable to the network. To give them that opportunity, again, not just to promote and amplify the people who are doing the moderation, but now 5, 6 people at a time. Every one of those groups, as you know from experience, they become tight, right? You gain the access and the resources to each other. And what the end result is now we have an event that really feels to me like less like we're putting it on and more like we just opened it up, right? And I had to, one of the parts of that is I had to take myself like off stage, and it's not, not that I like, I actually think I have like an anti-ego that I could use to have more ego, but like so year one and year two, 8 keynotes, right, on the big stage. I did all 8 of them. And it was good for my career. I'm not going to lie, like in terms of exposure. I'm not doing any of them this year. And it isn't because I didn't want to, or like I didn't feel like doing the prep work, or I'd rather sit in the back and watch. It was because I realized that this could be more valuable were I to become more integrated. Bringing in, a moderator like Dustin, and, having a conversation between Satine on my team and Whataburger, who know each other, and then doing all these little different questions of looking like, again, if our goal, and we're really trying to live this ethos of being the restaurant industry publication for the restaurant operator, like, let's go aspire and also be a part of a group. This had to evolve in that direction. And so I also, in terms of like speakers, I get asked this question every single year. People will like email me on the agency side and be like, "What's the process? Where's the form for me to fill out?" Or like, I'm like, I do not have one. So I either
Jot
put
form. Where's the jot form at?
right, and would that make my life easier? Yes, it would, because we have other publications who do that, and it's great. But I'm not willing to do it right now because I like this idea that like I put this call out on the LinkedIn, and I get people who come to me who want to speak that I have no idea who they are, never heard of them. I may know their company or their restaurant brand, but like we haven't interacted before. But like just having that open conversation, I think creates this version of an event that's different and people feel it. So like, so this year in particular, I got a lot of speakers who have not spoken year one or year two, who I've never seen speak at any event. I did a podcast with one of them recently. He's from Biscuitville, Charles, and he was just incredibly insightful guy. I mean, and I would have never had that opportunity had I not opened that up, because he wouldn't have sent some official communication through, whatever channel our corporate account had set up, like email wise or something, because I had never heard from him. I didn't know who he was. And so he messaged me on LinkedIn, and he's just like, "Yeah, this looks cool. I'd love to be a speaker." I think he's on a panel that you're on, actually. And yeah, and I got to know him a little bit, and now we're giving him a voice, right? And he's, his insight is not the type that you hear every single day on every single conference and every website. And again, like we're all as media organizations covering similar brands, because that's kind of like, Taco Bell had a major news thing yesterday, so of course we're writing about that, and it's great. But like, did Charles from Biscuitville, like, how do you get him to the table? Because he deserves to be
Wow.
there, right? And we're going to have more value as an organization having people like Charles involved and listening and being a part. So, yeah, you just got to keep those doors open and not let things get in the way sometimes, whether it is ego or, pay to play models or some of this other stuff that is just historically part of magazine publishing. And for us, I just want to create the biggest, most inclusive network that we can, and let those other things flow from there. And so I don't know if Charles will listen to this, but if you are listening, Charles, I'm really happy to have you on board. His podcast actually runs the week of March, and so everyone will look forward to learning about someone that maybe they didn't know before.
Charles, I'm gonna tag you on LinkedIn whenever this drops. But everything that you're saying, every one of us understands what that really means. And I'll put it in a different context. How many times have we been to a annual meeting or just any meeting, and we get there and we think it's going to touch on everything we've found important, whether in our job or role or industry. And then we get there and it covers all the crap that we didn't care anything about. And now we've spent all this time getting all of this information that wasn't truly important. What you've been doing with being able to create the space for that communication to come directly from the people that are out there doing it, it is different. I'm not going to say it's world changing, Mahatma Gandhi type of, different, but
Yeah,
what
no,
I'm stating is, but it is absolutely, absolutely helping to gain back time of not feeling like time is wasted. There's too many times that we go to conference expos, even just regular weekly meetings, and we're there and we think what's going to be covered doesn't. Being able to have the people create those spaces, have those conversations, touch on those topics, ask the piercing questions to each other, not just to a voice, not to say that FSR and QSR is just a voice, but there are many voices within our industry doing many things. And then the last piece on that is social proof can be damning. Social proof can be misleading. Yes, you can hear about someone and know of someone and read something from someone, but that doesn't mean that they are the best content giver on things that would be impactful for people listening. So first thing is,
Yes,
if you are someone
it's true.
out there, if you are someone out there and you know what you know, don't be scared to reach out to other people that are in the industry. Your value to what we do in this space, in any space, is very important. Yes, there is that fear of rejection, but get to the table, reach out, say hello, raise your hand, because your information of how you see things is very important. Now, speaking of information, speaking of how we communicate, now, besides branding, talking to your team is very important. You lead a team of people within your role. Lots of restaurant brands do the same thing. And you've spoken with a lot of executives of how they try to get across their brand to their team and to their guests. What have you learned about how the best restaurant brands keep their teams on the same page with what the value is, what the vision is, and what they're trying to get across to their customers or guests?
Yeah, it's a very loaded thing. I think it's probably a lot of what you hear, right, in just terms of like that standard and expectation and transparency is a day one thing. I will give you some personal experience on this, and I actually think we spoke about this when you were on my podcast. But being a manager is pretty new to me, although at this point it's getting less and less new over the years as I get older. But what I have found out is there is a very powerful element of like having a clear directive of who you are and who your brand is. So all these things that we're talking about, I had written a mission statement out a few years ago, and I was like, why am I doing this? Is anyone even going to read this? But what it wasn't so valuable to people already on my team. They kind of looked at it, were like, oh yeah, you know. What has turned out to be really valuable in is the people who I've hired, and then also having people in certain leadership positions who live these things, right? And this is true in a restaurant as well as my publication. So you have these cultural pillar pieces. You want to nurture these people on your team. They're so, I think you used to even talk, what you used to call mini GMs, right? I'm getting that correct. So these people are, I just had this conversation with our CEO recently about kind of going through some people I view to be these cultural pillars, right? So when I hire people, the more you get that person in place and the clearer you are about what that means, the less work you're doing really trying to manage somebody. And you're trying to say to them every day, how can we get here? How can we get there? How can we do this? So at our Women in Leadership conference the other day, whether or not this person realizes this or not, I was having a really good conversation with somebody who's a leader of a brand. She's awesome. And I just sort of self-selected her as my new mentor because I don't really have one. I told her this the other day when we talked for about an hour, like a follow-up call. And she gave me some amazing advice. And so I think a lot of times we need leaders to help us to take stock of like what we're doing. And then you just need people culturally on your team to put into the positions to get that expectation off the ground right away. And what you end up finding is you start to hire people like Satine is our newest team member. And she, right, basically, like, and 90% of this is on her, 10% is probably on us. But she went right off the gate. She was that person, right? She understood how we operated, what we wanted, and she went after it because she was motivated to do a great job. But she had that playbook, and she had Ben on our team and Callie on our team as sort of guideposts to be like, I should follow their lead. So I instituted these two people, and it goes down a ladder. Now you suddenly have this really high-performing, younger employee who I don't really have to tell her all that much what to do. I get to stand in the back of the room. Had a really interesting conversation with her. She moderated the keynote of our Women in Leadership conference, which is not easy to do. And I mean, she's 22 years old. She had never done it before. And I was sitting there and I was talking to someone else and I was like, I could tell you within 30 seconds, I knew she was better at this than me. And I am not upset about this. I'm only going to figure out ways to leverage that. But I can, like, she started talking at the beginning and I turned to this person on our event side and I was like, Satina's a better moderator than me. And she better than I will ever be. I don't have what she has. I could tell you right now. And she got off, and I didn't tell her that necessarily. I was just like, wow, you did an amazing job. I know you were nervous. Like, you had nothing to be worried about. She said something to me like, well, in my upbringing, in my life, like, doing a great job is the expectation. So I just feel like I went out there and did what I was supposed to do. And I was like, well, okay. you know, I guess that is, but part of that is internally too. Like, yeah, it's,
Hmm.
her parents and all that, but it's also like she understands like what I expect of her, what our organization, how high our standard is with events, how much we care about the keynote person we put up there and we want to do a good job for them. And so that's kind of how I look at it, is that it is really this if you want high performing people, you got to have other high performing people. You
Hmm.
have to have transparency and expectations and accountability. And you have to pay attention to people who are not high performing. My new life coach, we were going over some things and she's like, "Well, ask yourself sometimes like how much time did you spend with, X person trying to tell them like what you hope they can do, and then after a while you might just be like, well, this isn't a capability question, it's a willingness question, and you just spent a month on this. And if you hadn't spent a month on that and that person was like Satine or somebody else, imagine what you would have accomplished in that month instead of
Wow.
constantly trying to figure it out." And I thought, yeah, that's a hard reality. But you're correct. Because I look at it, it's like I got this like list of ideas, right? They can be bold, but like you could have went after that with the right person, and instead
Hmm.
you've been trying to figure out for way too long whether or not this person's even willing. So that's something I'm working on, is trying to learn how to manage through situations of that nature where like somebody is going to be defensive of what they're doing, or if they've been doing it some way and they don't necessarily agree with you, versus like that other side of the coin, which is this is the organization you're coming to work for. And that's just unique to my situation. But I do think that in restaurants' case, that's when you see the best performing cultural organizations are the ones that Taco Bell told me this years ago, that they have the unique task in life of employing fans of the brand. How often does that happen in our world? Like, you go to work for an accounting firm or a bank and you're like, oh, I love Wells Fargo. I eat here all the time, right? So like they have a certain expectation that on day one of people who come in the door and they're like, Taco Bell, I've eaten here my whole life. This is how it looks in my brain. And it is on them to either live up to that or to fall completely flat on it. And being a large franchise organization, of course, both things happen, but that's the like unique thing that a lot of restaurants have on the start of it. And if you look at Chick-fil-A, this is the gold standard example. It just is. No one's going to argue with that, right? People ask me all the time, how do they have such good hospitality, or employees that are so nice?
They brainwash them inside the office. No,
Right,
that's not what.
exactly. Well, sort of, right? So, I
Dunk them
mean,
in the water.
yeah. So number one that they do is there's two like anchor points. One is being the fact that they're owner operator led restaurants, so they're corporately empowering community driven leaders who are not necessarily like large multi-brand franchisees. And not there's anything wrong with that, but these are like people who live in Houston and know the market and care about the people, and they get to pick the way that they hire and the wages that they set and the organizations that they want to donate to. So that's the start. And they pick these people. It's harder to get a Chick-fil-A than it is to get into Harvard. They pick them based on those kind of traits. So they're interviewing in the corporate suite on personality and leadership, and not necessarily on restaurant experience. They have enough systems and SOPs in place to train anybody to run a Chick-fil-A, and then they make you work in the restaurant too, right? So that's like part of it. But and then the second thing that they do is they're very siloed in the way that they run their restaurants. So people have a very specific task. You're the person who greets people outside. You don't do five different things. So that's like their other kind of anchor point along with the technology they use. But more importantly, in my opinion, and the reason that this is true is because their cultural branding and who they are is so ingrained in the mind of every single person who
Mhm.
works there and comes to work there, that you know the minute you get there that that is who you are supposed to be, and they have zero tolerance if you are not. But they don't run into that all that much because you are not going to go work there if you are not a hospitable human being. You will not make it through the interview process. And you also understand that expectation because the commercials, the way that they come across, the experience you have from eating there. And so that I think is the thing for restaurants across the board is like you can basically have this feed itself if you are very set in who you are, and that expectation exists more holistically than the manual that you have to hand somebody on day one that they're not going to read. So that's my answer. That's a lot of pieces to that answer, but that's how I would describe it.
You hit it on the head though, in talking through how restaurant brands keep their teams on the same page. One of the core nuggets that I took from that is your customers, your guests have to know who you are. Your people walking into your restaurant to eat, to dine through your drive-through. They need to know who you are. If we aren't focusing on how we appear to our customers as a culture, that's where we go wrong with keeping our team on the same page, because our team is simply focused on tasks and duties. It's more than that. They are focused on tasks and duties and roles. The customer is more so looking at the image. Whenever we can get the image right, the culture piece for our team can fall in place sooner. You touched on something else. The core pillars within your brand and hiring people in order to fit those core pillars. They should be fitting in one of those 5, one of those 3, one of those 10, hopefully not 10 pillars. 10 pillars is way too many, but one of whatever number of pillars that your brand is, whether be it magazine, hotel, newspaper, restaurant. You should be fitting people into those pillars because you want them to lead in one or more of those pillars. If they don't fit in any, if they can't fit in any of those, why are you bringing them on board? Then creating the space for them to be able to help lead while using core people on your team to help keep up those guiding posts, to let them have the space without it feeling like top-down direction for them to grow and to help lead in it within a way that you didn't think of. Because you are right, hiring someone, a bunch of Jasons or a bunch of Dannys doesn't make sense. It's going to be so far leaning, the ship is going to tip over. You need to have that balance on all points of your ship in order to make it through those rough waters and also the calm ones as well. And then going through Chick-fil-A, that is correct. You can get hired in Miami, in Denver, in LA, or Fayetteville, North Carolina. 9 times out of 10, you know that you will be trained the exact same way. You know what that expectation is. But all of those things help to make sure that the brand, the team, and even the customers, they all get the same consistency of being on that same page. Now, I know we've gotten into this, but a few more questions.
Yeah,
you do great. You do great at storytelling, and storytelling is super important for brands. You did touch on this some when speaking through Taco Bell and Chick-fil-A of working at or eating at a Taco Bell your whole life. And then you have this picture in your mind. But storytelling is super important for all brands. How do restaurants use stories to build strong relationships with their guests and help stand out in the market?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you are. I just went to this new ice cream shop opened by my house. I had seen it in a dad's group, like a local dad's group that I'm in.
Wait, hold on. We have to pause. Danny, you're in a local dad's group.
Well, like a Facebook group, but I'm actually I'm a lurker in there. I don't ever meet up with them, which is on me, I guess. But I do like follow what they talk. They talk about like places to go. And so anyway, I saw this like ice cream place that they're like just open in Chapel Hill. It's lives up to the hype. And I went there. It had some like punny name. It was called Chapel Chill or something, and it was great. I mean, ice cream was really good, local. Zero storytelling inside the restaurant though, and I would tell my wife at the time, I'm like, they really could use like a something in here because I had read about them. Like I saw the storytelling outside. Like I looked them up, and it was made on site and all this like, random stuff or whatever. It was cool, They were trying to, they were seriously local, right? But you went inside, it looked like a chain. And I'm trying to give them advice. I didn't tell them. It's like I went up there and I'm like, I work at QSR. Here's some advice. But it was just something I thought. So like that's one side of it, of course. The other side of it is, of course, what you do on like social and marketing. And again, it kind of depends on who you are. If you're Wendy's, right? It's a lot different than like Pepper Lunch. And Pepper Lunch's CEO, Troy Hooper, is a master storyteller. I mean, I told him this before, at least I think I have, and if I haven't, and he's listening, he knows I feel this way about him. But, like, he has done such a good job of, like, getting his brand. Okay, so your earlier point of, like, meeting and putting yourself out there, it isn't just like him posting about what they're doing and what's going on, but like you can see in the interaction and the reaction he gets to news of like a new prototype or an opening. And again, like in the grand scheme of the world, like QSR industry is a large place. Taco Bell's want to get to 10,000 locations they're talking about yesterday. There's already 7,000 or whatever the number is. Troy, I don't know what Pepper Lunch is at right now, but it's not a lot, right? And that's totally cool. They're on the journey, and they're big globally, growing in the U.S. He can post about opening one location, it gets a big deal, and that's a testament to his storytelling talent because he's created from going to conferences, from putting himself out there, from doing podcasts with other people in the industry that he does on its own, and then he comes on other ones, and Paul and his team is also great at this, and they have this huge world, right, that they have put themselves into through the user connections of like, hey, I'm going to congratulate you. You're part of my tribe. And it's not just this like solo go at it yourself thing that you're not willing to talk to anybody about. And I had him on the CEO to CEO thing the other day with my friend Scott Taylor, who has a multi-brand company he's running now. And so they already knew each other, right? They were friends. And so storytelling has a lot of different elements. Again, if you have giant marketing coffers like Wendy's or Taco Bell, that's a different thing. You're showing up on social media and all different personalities. I mean, Wendy's is the absolute master of this, right? Their Facebook strategy versus their TikTok strategy versus their X strategy is just unrivaled in how great it is. And that's similar to like, a lot of brands, they show up in that way in their storytelling. Like McDonald's doesn't need to tell you their story. That's not how they operate or go about driving trial. And so again, it's like everyone is different, and you have to look at like, what are my goals? Are you the CEO of an emerging chain like Pepper Lunch who's looking to put yourself on the map and to get as many people to help you as possible from their insight and to share that insight both ways, to learn about vendors, to figure out how this technology is working at Portillo's? Will it work for me? Things like that. That's just an example. But that kind of idea, again, he's an amazing example. I give him all the credit in the world. I sit there and marvel at it sometimes, and there are other versions of that out there. He's just I guess on my mind for some reason at the moment, but he's coming to he's coming to our conference, and he's we had a conversation about it a couple months ago of like, hey, do you want to be on this panel? And he's like, what if I just did this session on AI and I just gave him like open my playbook to people? And I'm like, that takes a certain level of something that would not have happened years ago. Restaurants wouldn't have done that. They just would not have said, here's how I do it, in a room full of other restaurants. Just wasn't a thing. I was like, hey, you're a competitor. Here's what I'm doing with AI. But Troy sees the value in that and sees that it doesn't have to come at the expense of him. In fact, he could become a better brand there. He could get the message out, get franchisees interested of other, people he runs into, or find his brand opening a location with a huge line out the door and having that chance to be celebrated. So he gets it, in my opinion. And a lot of people do. And again, if I were Taco Bell, I probably wouldn't do such a session, but I understand like the value. So you really have to kind of look at yourself, understand what is you're trying to do. But to your earlier point, I would very, very much recommend trying to have a larger network. Go talk to people, come to our events, come to our webinars, come to other things that we do where you will just have that opportunity to learn from somebody else. And you might have to teach them something, right? That's the trade-off here. But you will find at the end of the day, when you're running into a problem or you're trying to figure out which POS you want to use, the more people that you can engage with, and this includes vendors, just ask them for help. And that is I live this too in my version of storytelling. Is I was on another anecdote for you. I was on a webinar about menu trends recently that we were hosting, and ahead of it, I was just like, I don't know anything about this. I can write this article, sure, but like, I don't have any insight here. And so the two speakers that we had, which were both great menu people, I told them, I'm like, you have 45 minutes. Do whatever you want. I'll be here in the background troubleshooting the questions. But there is power in this moment for me to give this floor to you. I don't need if I had hopped on there and talked myself and I led questions and I played a very active role, would I have built my personal brand on some level? Maybe. But to me, it was way, way better for everybody for me just to give them that stage and to let them be the experts. And so that's my advice in storytelling is like, ask yourself who can help you? I ask it all the time. I'm always asking for help. I have 25 moderators this year because I asked for help. It wasn't any other reason. I got Dustin doing the main stage keynote because I asked him to help me out. And I thought he would do a better job. And I just thought it would be good for everybody. You gotta lean into people helping you out, and then you will find that it will help you too. You gotta give and take a little bit.
I tell you who does a great job within the same circle of Troy Hooper when it comes down to storytelling, and that's Sean Walchef. Sean Walchef with Cali Barbecue. He started Cali Barbecue Media on the West Coast, and people are like, well, why the hell would a barbecue guy start a media company? And when we think about he's just a damn amazing.
Yes.
When you think about storytelling, we all think that, well, I told it to my team, now everyone knows my stuff, or I was interviewed on a podcast, so now everyone knows me, or whatever. That's a lie. It's false. It's not real. Storytelling in the context that we think that we may tell this once, but it reaches the smallest sliver of people that are out there. Storytelling is generated over and over again from campfires back in the caveman days, and that's how culture was actually built. It was actually built sitting around feasting over the day's kill of the foraging and retracing through what happened. And the moment that stops is the moment that it no longer exists. So even when it comes down to brands and people, that storytelling aspect is so powerful as what you just described. And it's not just telling the story of the brand. It's telling the story of how you connected with that brand in your role working for that brand or being their competitor. Whatever that story is, it helps weave that contextual thread that helps people to really see what the whole map looks like from different angles. Everyone will have their own different point of view, but that storytelling, that connection, helping to weave that picture, it is very, important. And I'm glad that I can help to contribute articles to FSR in order to help give some of that context. I'm glad that you asked me to be a part of QSR Evolution Conference to help be on the panel to help weave some of that storytelling. So I hope all of the listeners really take away from this. We may be introverts. We may be focused on tasks and goals and building our companies or working for a great company. But building your community, connecting with your network, putting yourself out there, not too far out there, not 20 feet out there, but taking 2-3 steps further out of your normal routine in order to speak about your moment so that others can learn or answer questions when others have challenges. That also helps to that storytelling. Now, I know we are getting towards the end, but there's one question that I like to ask. I gotta ask every guest this question. All right. So at the leadership table, we believe in conversations, of course, that inspire, lead, and elevate. What's one conversation, just one conversation in your career that profoundly shaped who you are as a leader?
So I've told this story before. Many years ago, I was when I first started my sports writing career. It was at this tiny beachside newspaper in Florida. Cool place. First assignment I was given was to go do this fishing tournament from Brooklyn. I know nothing about fishing, anything about this. And I remember I said there was two guys on staff. I kind of asked both of them, like, kind of their advice on what I should do. And one of them was like, so, you sit there, right? And then, like, they bring fish in off the boat, and, like, you don't really know what the big fish was until the very end of the day. So you could sit there all day long with nothing happening, right? And so I asked the one guy, I'm like, what do I do? And he's like, yeah, you just show up, like, at 7:30 at night, get the quote from the guy running the organization, and then you leave, right? And you write your little story about this guy who picked this 50-pound fish. It's 600 words long, goes in the newspaper. Knock yourself out. It's not a big deal, Danny. Don't worry about it. But I looked at this and I'm like, I don't know if I want to be this guy. Like, I know this isn't me, right? So then I asked the other guy, the higher performer, the boss. Like, I'm like, what should I do if I go here? And he's like, look, here's all you need to know is go cover this fishing tournament. Make sure everybody there thinks this is the most important thing in the world to you. Do not let them know you know nothing about fishing, but not from like an ignorance standpoint. You could tell them like, hey guy, I'm from New York. I don't fish. It isn't that. Like, don't let him know you don't care. Make sure that he thinks that this is the biggest story of your life. And I'm sitting there going like, how the hell am I going to do that? So then I got two very different sides of the coin at this pivotal moment of my career as a 2 year, whatever hell age I was, sitting like, okay, well, which guy do I want to be? Do I want to be the guy in charge, like the guy who's doing a great job that everyone in the community loves, or I want to be the other guy who's kind of like, he's cool, nice guy, but like he's just sort of coasting the road, right? So I went there, like right when it started. I was there the entire day, and I ended up doing so I did the story about who had the biggest fish, and but I also found this guy. I was sitting there and he was like, he looked broken. I don't know, like he just looked like he was messed up, right? So I was talking to him. I'm like, like what happened out there? Like, are you like an old man in the sea or like what? And he told me this long story about his family had been in this car accident, the blah stuff, whatever. Whole crazy thing, and all these people who had been in this accident were here, like they were part of this one boat out there fishing. And so for the next 3 days, like I followed this journey with them from all the stuff they had gone through in this emotional tragedy and crazy stuff. So I ended up doing 2 different lines of coverage, right? I did the dude with the 40-pound fish and this family. And so this family that I had written about for 3 days ended up going on the like front page of the news side of the paper. And again, I'd been there 3 days. And I did the sports story. And the editor of the paper was just like, I don't know where in the world you like found this, but this was a really good human interest thing. And the organizers of the tournament, this has been going on for 40 years. We've been covering this thing. When it was over, they were coming up to me and like thanking me, saying no one ever has covered this like this before. The family was calling me for weeks after this, all this kind of stuff, right? And I learned a really valuable lesson through that experience. And I've always tried to tell people I hire about this, not necessarily that story, but just like, hey, when you go to write something and someone's entrusting to you their knowledge or their story or their information, the worst thing in the world you could do is sit there at the end of it, and maybe they're a really small brand and them going, wow, like if I was Burger King, he probably would have tried harder. Like, I want everybody that I ever write to or talk to or engage with or interact with to know that, like, this is all I have to give you. And you may think, like, I get this feedback sometimes of, like, I'm kind of like a monotone, never super excited personality. This comes off in my, like, moderation style. But it isn't that I don't care. Like, people, I do not want anyone to ever think I don't care. And if they think you care, like, you've won 90% of the battle. So, that I've taken through my whole career. It was very, very valuable in sports writing because I was covering everything from Little League baseball to high schools. And I used to get that feedback a lot where I remember we had a girls lacrosse team one time do this. Like, they went to the state title game. And I had been given that assignment because nobody on staff wanted to cover girls lacrosse in high school. It's not the best thing to watch. It's got weird rules. But I mean, this families that were involved in the coverage, the articles that I'd written, everything from like one of the kids had cancer to all this different stuff that we got into over the course of like 2-3 weeks. I mean, I still, to this day, once in a while, I'll post on LinkedIn and it might be hidden down there in the comments, but there will be someone who will be like, I remember when you we're in St. Augustine. I remember what you did for lacrosse. I hear from this other lacrosse guy all the time where he'll be like, I still remember. And I'm like, yeah, I know you remember. I get it. But like there's this other guy who had a son who was on this Bartram Trail football team. He now works for Chick-fil-A in some capacity. I don't really understand. But I hear from him once in a while, right? Because it's like they just knew that I cared. Even on days where maybe I didn't know or I didn't want to. I don't like lacrosse that much. I'm not like I knew anything about it. I sure as hell don't like fishing. I don't knock people who fish. It's just like not in part of my growing up life. But you cannot allow your clients, who are in our case the people that we're writing about, to ever feel that way. And so that to me is number one, 100% the most important thing as a journalist that you can do. I tell every young intern I have this, is that you have to, and you cannot I had this happen to me. This will be my final anecdote of the day for you. This guy sent me a story once. He used to work for me. And the email in his subject line said something like, I know this isn't good. I'm sorry. I ran out of time, but this story sucks. And I tell him back, I'm like, look, if you ever tell me that again, like you're not going to work here, because you might as well have just told me this is the best story you ever wrote, because if you think that way, like, it's not okay. He ended up not staying around very long, thankfully. But moral that is, like, that is my one thing. Do not ever appear like you don't care. I have no tolerance for it. I don't care what industry it is. I don't care what we're doing. I don't care if you're moderating, speaking. And I am very much a closed circle person where I will be very loyal to the people around me. And I get asked, like, how you get a speaker? And I'm like, because he's helped me, because he's open with me, because we have this back and forth that I trust him. And I will do the exact same thing on the other side of that equation. That if I don't think you don't care, I don't think you're supportive, if you don't want to be a part of it, you can go somewhere else. So that is my gospel of leadership, is treat everything like it's the World Series, even if it's a fishing tournament or Little League baseball. That's my
this is exactly why I wanted to have you in the seat at the table in order to give this perspective. We have talked about so many great things. I'm not going to go through everything again right now, but before we wrap up, because I know you're busy. I know our listeners have probably parked their car before going into work because they wanted to hear everything. But before we wrap up, how can they connect with you, learn more about you, your work, the magazines?
Yeah. Well, me personally, LinkedIn, I is the easiest way to get me. I'm not really on other social media currently. I do have an X account, but I'm a ghost. So LinkedIn, obviously, just find my name. But otherwise, QSRmagazine.com and FSRmagazine.com, I would personally suggest signing up for the e-letters. They're both free. You'll get Jason's content. You'll also see other things, because a lot of times people are like, how do I know when to register for this, or how do I know to apply for young leaders, or how do I know whatever it might be. And I'm like, that is where like I send that out every single day, so you get. FSR is 4 days a week, QSR is 5 days a week, so it's 9 of those a week. And in those 9 e-letters, we will keep you posted on every way to get involved that we have discussed here, from under 40 lists to whatever, right? All the different things that we do. So that is the way I would say it. Go to our websites. Of course, register for our conferences, which are now open, QSRevolutionconference.com. And the Next Gen Restaurant Summit, which are co-located. But yeah, you can register, but if you ever have any questions, I'm always around. I try to be open to these things as long as you're not selling me something, because here's the one thing that people don't realize, Jason, is that I don't have financial power. So I get these companies all the time on LinkedIn who drop in there and they're like, I see you work at, the media. Can I sell you printing? And I'm like, you don't realize, like, I don't buy anything, so no.
I don't have that pull like that.
Right.
I'm just here to help for the content,
right?
Not
exactly.
for selling or buying things.
Right. So as long as you're not trying to sell me something that I can't buy, and it's not that I'm ignoring you, I just literally can't buy it. Please reach out, DM me or whatever. Happy to help.
Love it. Well, to our listeners for today, we have explored how Danny's dry humor has caused him to be a ghost on X and on everything else except for LinkedIn. And we also explored how communication shapes restaurant brands, leadership, customer loyalty, and team member loyalty as well. Danny, thank you for sharing your expertise with us at the leadership table. And again, to our listeners, if you found value in today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a fellow leader. You can also visit us at www.jasonebrooks.com for leadership insights and resources. Until next time, keep leading with impact, and remember, manage, lead, coach, repeat. Thank you, and have an excellent week.